In this episode of Healthcare Disrupted, we are taking you inside SSM Health's groundbreaking partnership with Chamberlain University, the Aspiring Nurse Program, a bold step towards cultivating the next generation of nurses. From academic and financial support to a fully integrated career in nursing, it's a blueprint for what a modern, flourishing nursing team can and should look like to really balance out the care needs of the future. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Healthcare Disrupted. We're super excited that all of you are joining us today. And we're here to talk about an interesting topic, nursing education. So we all know there's a nursing shortage on the horizon. But what we don't talk about enough are the barriers that keep future nurses from ever making it to the bedside or the clinical setting, or the barriers that keep nurses from staying at the bedside and in the clinical setting. From the struggle to getting into nursing school, to the gaps in clinical training, to the challenge of landing that first job in the right place, and to paying off the debt that comes with it, it's a tough road. Today, we're going to break it all down for you, and we're going to talk about a new partnership that directly addresses many of these challenges so more nurses can enter the profession prepared and ready to thrive. So today, I'm excited to welcome a nationally recognized nursing executive, both in nursing practice, nursing education, and healthcare innovation, Dr. Karen Cox. And Dr. Cox is the president of Chamberlain University. So Karen, welcome. Thank you for being here. Will you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
So a little bit about me. I have taken a long pathway to nursing. I started right out of high school as a licensed practical nurse, which I'm really proud of because I think that career pathway is so important for so many of us. I've been Chamberlain president since 2018, but the 24 years prior to that, I was first the chief nursing officer and then the chief operating officer at Children's Mercy Kansas City. And that really gave me a window into what's needed in nursing education in a different way than perhaps someone who'd been in the academic world their entire career. And I'm really passionate about reimagining how we do education. And we have to remember that nursing is called nursing practice for a reason. The theory is important, but the practice is just as important. And so how do we make sure that those experiences fit together and work really closely with our healthcare partners like SSM Health?
Absolutely. One of the things I love about you, Karen, is really what I would call bridging that gap between the fact that you were in practice, you led practice, you saw our new grads coming into the setting and what some of the opportunities are and challenges that they're experiencing. And then you were able to move into the academic environment. And so really bridging that gap across all three, I think is really important as we continue to think about the future of nursing education and most importantly, the future of improving our clinical care delivery systems. So tell me, what are some of the major trends that you're seeing across the U.S. nursing workforce and nursing education that are impacting us today?
Well, as you know, there has been what I would call an exodus of nurses from direct care. So there are plenty of nurses in the U.S. that are licensed, but they don't stay where we need them most, taking direct care of patients. And so one of the scariest trends for us, the most concerning, would be the fact that it's great that the baby boomers finally getting to retire, right? That's okay. But the second piece is the second largest group of people leaving the bedside are those in their 20s and 30s. And you say, well, that's not great, but it's more than that. It throws off our projections because when we do national projections of how many nurses are needed, we look at somebody who's 25, we assume they're going to have a 30-year career in nursing doing something with patients for the most part, a high percentage. And so it throws us off for that. The other is really looking at different pathways to nursing. As I mentioned, my pathway started with an LPN. I needed that confidence to move to the next level. And one of the things that's different now is how hard it is to get into nursing school. And so we need different pathways in place for people who are not a traditional student coming right out of high school, going away to college and, doing their prerequisites and then going to nursing programs. What we have instead is a group of nurses, potential nurses who want to be in nursing, but they can't necessarily stop working. Our students at Chamberlain, most of them work. They often, because they're a little bit older, their average is about 26, and they often have children. And so they have other responsibilities. So we like to say nursing education for them, their nursing school is about their third priority down the list. Whereas a traditional student is coming in, that's really their goal, is to get a degree and graduate. But it leaves out a lot of people who we know we need in nursing. And so that's something that I think that this program with SSM Health is going to help us do a better job of.
That is such great perspective, Karen. So a couple of things I want to maybe pull the thread on. So I think one of the first things that sometimes folks either don't understand or misinterpret when they start to see data is we have data now that says that we have a growing shortage of nursing over the next 5 to 10 years. We have a shortage now. We don't actually see that shortage getting better. But your point about those numbers take into account nurses with an active license. They do not take into account nurses with an active license who are actually practicing and taking care of patients. And so we have a whole segment of the workforce that is underrepresented in those numbers, which are those nurses who have come into practice and then made an early exodus for whatever reason and are no longer practicing, but are keeping a license active. So that what that really means for me is that delta between what we need and what we have is even larger than what we recognize sometimes. And then you brought up two really great points: how hard it is to get into nursing school, and then the fact that sometimes our students are graduating, become practicing nurses, and then are leaving. What are some of the challenges you think that are impacting both of those?
So the first one about nurses leaving, one of the things we know nationally, and this is before the pandemic, actually, so this is not a pandemic-related change, is a first-year turnover of nurses right out of school is 30%. Now, think about that. Think about the impact that has, both financial and as well as, you think you're a nurse with 5 years of experience on a unit. You put a lot of time and energy into working with a new grad. And 1 out of 3 of them leave before their year is even up. And so I think that is another trend that we are trying to deal with at Chamberlain by looking at where people are going. So I don't think it's that people can't get jobs. There are plenty of nursing jobs, but nursing is so vast in terms of the opportunities. Someone who will do well in oncology may not be the right person to work in the burn center. And there's so many choices. And in nursing programs, you may or may not get to have experiences where you think you're going to be. So then you're disillusioned when you get there and it's not what you thought. So a few years ago, we started something called Practice Ready Specialty Focus. And what that does is allows students to say, if they're in good standing, they can say, I want to learn more about peri-op. And we've worked with AORN, the professional organization, and they have a theoretical component, 16 weeks. And then if they want, they can go to one of the partners that we're working with and spend their last 90 plus hours in that specialty. And it does 2 really important things. One, it may make a person say, I don't want to work there on the longest day. Or the person says, this is great. This is what I wanted. And it avoids having people orienting and the cost of orienting them and just not having them feel that joy in their practice that we know is really important to get them to the right place.
Yeah, and it starts to pull that education from the clinical setting up into their formal academic training to even help them be better prepared when they do start practicing, whether that is they learned that they love the specialty and that's where they want to practice, or whether it's they learned that that was not the right care setting for them and they want to think about a different care setting. I think both of those knowledge, both of those opportunities to gain knowledge, no matter which way the student goes, is valuable.
Yeah. And the interesting thing too is that, for many years, there were places that didn't take new grads into their area of practice. And one of those was peri-op. Another one was home care and even critical care. They want you to have 2 years of acute care experience, which is fine. But often once you get to the acute care, that's where you are. And you don't think about moving to the other specialty, or you don't like acute care and you go somewhere else. So what's interesting though, is when we started this and we said to nurses in peri-op, what happens typically for those of you who are in nursing, if the only perioperative experience you typically get is if for some reason there aren't enough patients to take care of on the inpatient floor, and they may send one of you down and you go down there and you stand in the back of the OR. Everyone ignores you. You might feel a little faint because you're just overwhelmed. And that's what you think OR is. And that is not attractive. So what we did by having them prepared, they go in and spend time there. They don't just walk in and an OR nurse has to show them what a sterile field is, or, how you actually get ready and prepared to take care of a patient in peri-op. It's a 16-hour program. So they know words, they know terms, and they look at the entire length of that perioperative experience. So it really makes a difference.
Absolutely. And I think it's making a difference in our practice environments and also for our new grads who are transitioning. So we use the term specialty for a minute, and specialty can be an excellent word or a 4-letter word, depending on what your perspective may be. And you also talked about acute care, or what we've traditionally called med-surg nursing before. And Chamberlain is thinking about adding a specialty program around the acute care floors or our med-surg floors. Will you tell me a little bit about your perspective on med-surg as a specialty?
Of course. So first, I don't even like the term med-surg. I don't know what to call it because they are each specialties. And in fact, 2 acute care units, nephrology and oncology, we have as a specialty, but they're usually on an acute care floor. And so to really try to make sure that we give it its due so that people realize you have to be very innovative, very creative, resilient, and be able to work even more in teams than you do if you're in critical care or in the ED. And so it's how do you make sure they see what it really is, because it's gotten to be the 4-letter word. I don't want to go there. I want to go anywhere else. And partially, I think some of that is because nursing faculty for many years would say, don't go to a specialty, go to acute care for it, do at least 2 years. I was told that. I ignored that. But a lot of people take that. And if that's the place they go first, then they either really love it or they don't, just like any other specialty. So I think if we develop that, and I appreciate you've volunteered to be one of the thought leaders in helping really think through how we portray it for what it is.
Absolutely.
And how important it is.
It's an important skill set. It's a skill set that not every nurse will be able to do. The critical thinking, the assessment skills that you have to have in order to be an excellent acute care nurse is really important. And we've done this to ourselves in nursing as nurse leaders, as nurses in academia, our professors. And it's interesting, if you look at our physician colleagues, they don't do this, right? Our acute care specialist are hospitalists, and it is a well-respected specialty within the acute care setting, and we need to do the same thing for nursing.
Absolutely. One of the things when you say we've kind of done it to ourselves is, you think about it, in some instances over the years, we paid nurses more to work in critical care. And if you stop and think about it, well, why wouldn't someone want to go to critical care? Because, more money insinuates that it's higher skill, more value.
Higher status.
And higher status. So again, those are all the things we have to really think long and hard on.
Absolutely. Such a great point, Karen. So another thing that Chamberlain's doing that I love is really taking this holistic approach to access and to education and to entry into nursing school. Will you tell me a little bit more about the holistic access and what that really means?
Yes. So holistic admissions process is something that AACN, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, talked about maybe 10, 15 years ago. And basically what it said was there's more to being a skilled, compassionate nurse than a GPA. Most of us are more than our GPA. And that doesn't mean you don't have a GPA that's solid. But for example, where I went and got my BSN, the GPA requirement now, 3.8, 3.9, or they don't look at you. Right. I had a 3.5. I thought that was completely respectable at the time, and turned out it worked out for me. So, just because you have a 3.2, there's more to your life. And oftentimes the students that we're talking to, their life is challenging every single day. As I mentioned, they often are older, have children or dependent family members. They almost all work, some of them full time, which when I went to school, they told us we couldn't do.
Right.
And they have to do it.
So in other words, they started a life.
They started a life, and then they came to the realization that this would be a great profession for them. And so we look at, of course, their GPA, and it has to be reasonable, of course, but we also look at the other things that they've done. And when you ask them to write just a 2-pager why they want to be a nurse, it's not a cold essay. It's based on life. It's, my mother had cancer and I saw the nurses and I saw what they had to be able to do, and I want to do that. Or it's, when I had a baby, there were complications, and I saw what would have happened if I hadn't had incredibly skilled but empathetic, compassionate nursing care. So they come to it from a different place. And it also means, though, that they need more support. And what do I mean by that? Somebody who's going straight from high school into a traditional program, they're ready to go. They know what they've studied for it. They probably have higher grades. Our students are very academically capable, but sometimes they just need help with more resources around things like, how do you manage your time when you have all these other challenges? What do you do if financially you get into trouble? And, sometimes it seems unusual, but if somebody is on their way to a clinical and they have a flat tire and they don't know what to do, that can send them out of that class. For many people, it would just be a hassle. But when you're financially challenged or you have other responsibilities, things that are annoyances to a lot of people become barriers. And so we have to be open and understand that. And we have to be flexible. And never were we more flexible than during COVID and all that happened there. And if that was a testament to flexibility. And we also think that by showing that care to them, they will understand how to care for patients and their families.
Oh, that's beautiful. And what we're really talking about is just all the plates we all have to keep spinning as adult learners. And so when you think about helping folks continue to spin those plates and be successful in nursing school, you all have really coined the term social determinants of learning. And so, and you wrap your arms around these students and really help them along in their journey. And I think the important thing for the audience to know is really that there's space for both students in our academia. It is wonderful to have the opportunity to go straight from high school into a destination school, and that will present one set of challenges for that student. And then it is great to have already started your life and have a family and be working and decide that you want to return and go to nursing school. And that is another set of challenges that student will have to work through.
That's exactly right. There's room for everyone, given the shortage we have, and we have to access pools of people that we haven't accessed before to look at nursing as a great profession. Men is the other group that we're working hard at Chamberlain. Only 11% nationally are men. And we really have to think about how to get the word out to them because it's a great profession, a great career. But what you said I liked, we put our arms around these students. I almost said patients because I'm still in the hospital world, but we put our arms around these students. They have to do the work. They're the ones that have to do the work and take in, CLEX, graduate, all of that. But we support them in a little different way.
Absolutely. So what we're really saying, Karen, is there's an opportunity for us to be able to admit more students. And then that means graduate more nurses. And so one of the things I'm excited about our partnership as we think about SSM Health is we're going to be introducing an additional 400 nurses into the marketplace and creating opportunity for them to become sticky with SSM Health and hopefully choose us every single day that they get up and want to practice as a destination and a best place to practice. So as you think about this for other academia environments, other practice environments across the country, you kind of got a recipe for what you think could be successful. Will you tell me about that?
Of course. We know that we still do things much as we've done for the last 20 years. And we're at a point where we need to really think differently about having the right people in the right place. And the destination schools, as you mentioned, often people go there, they get a great degree. There's no question about that. But then they move back to wherever they're from. And you need people that do both, that move, but that also stay and are connected to the community. So when you do a program like we're working on with SSM Health, they're going to stay in the community. Most likely. They're already there. They, as you said very eloquently, they have a life in this spot where they're at and they want to go to school, nursing school, and they want to practice. And so I think the destination schools have that, that model covered well. I think what I would like everyone though to think about is how can you have a more reliable pipeline of nurses? So as we go through this with you, instead of waiting till January of next year to see how many graduates you may get in May, you can look out over several Mays and say, we've got this many students and and you can also start talking with them about where they want to work.
Right. Giving them exposure and opportunity.
Giving them exposure. And we also believe that, I told you that most of our students work at least part-time, but many full-time. So instead of working in retail, nothing wrong with retail, but if you're going to be a nurse while you're working, if you work at SSM doing whatever, you have a different exposure. Nursing is about practice and exposure, and it's not just one way of doing clinicals. It's doing clinicals as traditionally we do and will do. It's being an employee and seeing, you really do learn by osmosis. I mean, you learn by watching and hearing and yes, you're immersed in it. And then the other is looking at the Earn to Learn program where you can do both, get some clinical hours working with a nurse at SSM Health, and you get both credit and you get paid. So that's not all of your program, but it's enough to really make some difference for people who are working, and it gives them a different level of exposure.
So as we think about all of the opportunities and the barriers to getting into nursing school, graduating and being successful, if we think about this from a lay perspective, we really could break it down into getting in, getting ready, getting hired by the right organization and the right care setting, getting transitioned from student to RN, and getting rid of the debt or the financial burden. And so, Karen, we thought if we could start to work through some of these opportunities or these barriers for folks, that we could be successful in admitting individuals who have had a strong desire to go to nursing school, who just did not believe that they could get through all these barriers. And we believe we're seeing some early success because we've rolled this out in the Oklahoma market and are starting to roll this out in our Missouri market. Will you tell us a little bit about what those early signs of success are related to access and financial burden that we're seeing from the response?
The response, as you know, we started first with Oklahoma and now are also including the St. Louis area, and we'll end up with all your sites of care across all 4 states.
All 4 states, yes.
In Oklahoma, though, we're seeing people. Number one, there aren't enough nursing schools there, and they're destination schools for the most part. So we're seeing great interest of people who are qualified and not qualified. I'm not talking about the 3.9, just looking at GPA. I'm talking about looking at them as a whole and what they've done. And so the response has been tremendous. And, it's one thing to have something rolled out, and over time, people learn about it and understand it. This wasn't like that. This was all of a sudden our enrollment people that we devoted to SSM Health were going, help, we need more help, because there are all these people with questions and interest, and they were around these barriers. The financial barrier is significant. And some healthcare systems, once you finish a program, will say, if you work here for 3 years, we'll forgive everything over those 3 years, all your loans, your debt. But a lot of people don't have the wherewithal to upfront have the ability to have funding and support financially. And so that, I think, is another big difference. So the access, the financial support, and then all the other things that we've talked about earlier in between.
Absolutely. And so from some of the numbers, within the first couple of weeks, we had 500 inquiries about interest in the Oklahoma market. We've had about 100 formal applications, and I think we're already up to 20 admissions for our first cohort that have been approved
by
and
us,
accepted by both of our parties.
That's right.
Which is really phenomenal for just a few weeks worth of work. So I am so excited to see this continue to come to fruition. And you spoke about the stories earlier. The stories of these individuals are amazing and heartfelt, and they will be amazing nurses in a few years.
And the one thing I would like to say, Amy, is that you and SSM Health have started the innovation trend. And while we all had all of those interests of potential students in your areas, I also have been getting calls from other health systems, large, medium, and small, who want to talk about how they could potentially do this. So congratulations to you and SSM Health for your innovative spirit, and you're willing to take risks and try new things.
Thank you. It all starts with a conversation and being willing to have a different mindset than we've had in the past. So as we think about disrupting nursing academia, and how do we start to prepare our students, our prospective students, our current students for all the complexities of healthcare that we're going to see in the future, I kind of think about this as a practice academia relationship, but you have a different way of thinking about this. You actually think about this as a triad. We share about the triad with us.
Of course. So there's no question that the academic world and the health system world, practice world, need to be united and look at things together. We'll be stronger. And there's some good one-off examples of how those have been very important and a bit disruptive. But what it misses out is that third group, which are nursing professional associations, and that are specialty based. And we've had good experiences now with AORN, with ENA, which is the emergency department nurses, with ONS, which is oncology, and with AACN, which is critical care. And they bring that specialty that somebody who's been an academic for 20 years isn't going to have anymore, right? And so we bring their expertise as we do our practice ready. And I think in the future, we prepare generalists in BSN programs in the U.S., and that's important. But it doesn't mean we can't layer on specialties to be supportive. It doesn't take away. And in our program, only about half of our students take advantage of that specialty. They're focused on the generals. That is absolutely fine. That's what we're credentialed and accredited to provide a student. So it's just a different way of looking at our association partners who are doing incredible work.
Absolutely. And I think what I really hear you saying, Karen, is going to take all of us and thinking about the practice environment, our professional organizations who really are an important part of creating and establishing evidence-based practice for all of us, and academia all coming together to think about what does the nurse of the future look like? What competencies do we need that are different? How do we interact with our environment differently? And how do we really create a thriving nursing workforce for the future? So as we start to wrap up and close today, one of the things that I always love to do is really put out a call to action for all of our listeners. So as you think about a call to action, what's the call to action for our nurse execs, and what's the call to action for our academia nurse leaders and professors as we think about disrupting the academia space for nursing, and how do we want to create the future of nursing?
Great question. And what I would say is that much of how we educate and train nurses is not that different, as I said earlier, than what we did before. And I would say the same thing about practice. We have new tools, we have exciting technologies and new practices in healthcare, new innovations in healthcare, in terms of how we treat and manage patients. But how we organize at the bedside isn't that much different. And I'm not saying it has to be radically different, but the mindset that we have in both those areas has got to shift so that we think about moving to the next century together and do it together, because it's not going to work if one group is much more innovative and open to new things than the other group. It will not, we need each other. We have a very symbiotic relationship. And so we can't see ourselves as separate. My job is just to educate outstanding nurses. Your job is to have nurses who take care of patients and do an incredible job. But there's that middle piece. How do we get them to the right specialty? How do we make sure that their onboarding doesn't take a year because they don't have some basics that you need and that change pretty quickly now? See, that's the other thing that I would say is different now than 20 years ago. Things change in our world rapidly, dramatically, quickly, overnight sometimes. And we've got to be leaders in ensuring that occurs across the board.
I love that. Well, thank you, Karen, for being here. And maybe thank you more importantly for being a disruptor in this space. I'm really excited about our partnership, and I hope this also starts to create additional conversation with other nurse executives and our nursing academia partners and our nursing professional organizations across the country. And so I would leave you all with really the call to action that I think is important here and necessary, which is let's think about how we all get around the table, our nursing practice leaders, our nursing professional organizations, and our nursing academia leaders, and really start to think about how are we going to create and educate the nurses of the future. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Healthcare Disrupted. We want to hear your voice, so dive into the conversation with us, challenge us, and help us disrupt healthcare for the better. Like this episode, subscribe now, and wherever you get your podcast, follow us on this journey.